And I'm a huge fan of Bitcoin and actually continue to become a greater fan of Bitcoin in the longer term. Because again, what I've loved seeing in Bitcoin is that every time we have a Moody's downgrade of banks, Fitch downgrades the US credit rating, or we even saw back in March some banks failing, we saw Bitcoin popping up. So it's establishing itself as this safety hedge when the banking sector starts to have trouble. What we see is with Japan having to loosen their yield curve control, that's pushing them closer to a credit event with 250% debt to GDP. I mean, again, how do you let interest rates go up when you have that much debt? It's tough enough for the US at, I think, around 130% debt to GDP. So there is that potential to have Bitcoin be a huge safety hedge in that scenario. We know that the Ripple decision went in Ripple's, in their favor from the judge, but now there's an appeals process that's like 2 years out, and that's just going to kill the altcoin market for another couple of years, most likely. So I think there's part of that, and then I also think that there's just this waiting on the Bitcoin ETF. Is it going to be approved? Is it not going to be approved? What happens if we go into a recession where we have de-risking and multiples coming in?
Hello and welcome to Money Talks. In this video, we'll dive deep into the captivating world of the crypto market and uncover the latest news in Bitcoin and stocks. Get ready to stay informed and make smarter financial decisions. Now let's begin our enlightening discussion with Gareth Soloway.
And I'm a huge fan of Bitcoin and actually continue to become a greater fan of Bitcoin in the longer term. Because again, what I've loved seeing in Bitcoin is that every time we have a Moody's downgrade of banks, Fitch downgrades the US credit rating, or we even saw back in March some banks failing, we saw Bitcoin popping up. So it's establishing itself as this safety hedge when the banking sector starts to have trouble. Now, my only negative is, and this is why I'm kind of intrigued by what we end up seeing in the crypto markets, is that what happens if we go into a recession where we have de-risking and multiples coming in? So essentially risk assets just selling off across the board. And my fear, unfortunately, is that we could end up seeing Bitcoin coming down with the equity markets. And I want to show you this chart because I think it's very telling, right? So if we look at the NASDAQ, so I have the QQQ on one side of my screen, and we have Bitcoin on the other, and I'm just going to remove these lines so it keeps it as simple as possible for us. But look at how far we are from the all-time highs on Bitcoin, and look at how far we are from the all-time highs on the NASDAQ. So essentially, the NASDAQ retraced about 80% of its drop. Bitcoin's only retraced about 30%. And so the thought process is this: what if, just hypothetically, we go into a recession and we see the NASDAQ go back to the October 2022 lows? What happens to Bitcoin? I mean, you can't tell me that if the NASDAQ drops all the way back down here, we're not going to see at least Bitcoin retesting that 15,000 level or so. And I even think it could potentially go lower. So I think if we got a credit event, that's a different story. But if it's your run-of-the-mill recession, then you're probably seeing Bitcoin hit the lows again before going substantially higher. You had told me prior that the NASDAQ was going to go back up 40% from where it was in October of 2022. If I didn't know, I would say, wow, Bitcoin could be at 60, 70, 80,000 at that point because of such a run in risk assets. That hasn't happened. And I think part of that is this overhang of securities law or the SEC trying to figure itself out or what they want to impose on the crypto markets. That's made people just stand back. We know that the Ripple decision went in Ripple's, in their favor from the judge, but now there's an appeals process that's like 2 years out, and that's just going to kill the altcoin market for another couple of years, most likely. So I think there's part of that. And then I also think that there's just this waiting on the Bitcoin ETF. Is it going to be approved? Is it not going to be approved? Everyone wants it to be so quick in crypto, but I think you're slowly seeing where some days it's a risk-on, risk-off asset, and then other days the NASDAQ falls or the S&P falls because of banking conditions and worries there, and Bitcoin actually pushes up. So it doesn't really have a true identity yet, but I do believe that it's getting slowly more towards that digital gold, that safety play as a Bitcoin asset. Basically, we're just, if you look, and let me show my chart again on Bitcoin because I think it's such an important chart to look at here, is it's just such a clear level that we've been hammering against. And you can go back all the way over here to 2021, and we just put that line through, and it basically has been the stopping point of the crypto market. So the thought process is this, is that you have a very clear line in the underbelly, which is right here, and it's right now right around 27.5 to 28,000. We have the 30, 31, 32,000 level, which is what we've been hammering on. Which one breaks? And what we know is that volatility has been sucked out of the crypto markets, which usually happens right before a major move. And what we know here is we have two levels to watch. If we break above this one, I think you get a big move up. If we break below this one, that's where trouble starts. You've broken the uptrend trend line at that point, and that's where you have to start getting worried about a bigger correction to the downside. I'm still angled there, but I will say this. If you take out that level that we just talked about around 31, 32,000, then I do think it frees Bitcoin to head to at least 35 to 36,000. Yeah, so let's bring up the charts here and we'll take a look. So right off the bat, what we can see here is that the S&P has kind of fallen off of the highs recently and kind of tested this key support level. So support, and again, you look for pivots, and so this little good education for people. But to understand a pivot, it's the highest point with a kind of an up and down on either side that gives you a pivot. And so you can see right through this high to this high, and that's exactly the low of the day today on the SPY, or the S&P 500. So right now, this is a run-of-your-mill pullback in an otherwise bullish trending market. Now, you know from past experiences and past discussions with me is that I don't buy that we're in a new bull market, even though this is the longest potential bear market rally in history. I do think that's from too much liquidity still stuck in the system. So my guess is we bounce off of this and then eventually collapse back down before, really making a bottom maybe next year at some point. So it's interesting, but right now the S&P is at support. We are down. You mentioned CPI data. I think the biggest thing to note on CPI is that we basically came in at estimates or maybe slightly better, but the PPI data today showed a different story. It's starting to uptick, and I've said for a long time, and you can go back, David, we've talked multiple times in the last few months. I said inflation's going to get sticky around 3%. And it's going to hover there, which is going to make it unbelievably hard for the Federal Reserve to lower rates and print money when the economy stutters. And I think that's where we are at this point.
Don't forget to join us as we continue to explore the unfolding events. What's happening in the crypto market? Let's take a quick look at some recent developments. Then we turn back to Gareth Soloway. Custodia Bank goes live, bridging digital assets with US dollar payments. MicroStrategy's stock soars 206% after adopting Bitcoin strategy. Former US OCC officials. Stablecoins can keep the dollar the world's reserve currency. Crypto exchange Bittrex settles with SEC. Agrees to pay $24 million. SEC extends its review on Archie's Bitcoin ETF, introducing a 21-day window for public commentary. BRICS. Expansion to make West recognize New World Order. De-dollarization. UAE professor. And that concludes an insightful episode of Money Talks. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more daily updates. Remember, knowledge is power, and we're here to empower you on your financial journey. Until next time, happy investing.